geographic farming allows you to layer in different strategies and have that compound effect.
Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Smart Agents Podcast. My name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. As always, with each new episode, our goal is to inspire you through the insight and inspirational stories from your fellow real estate insiders. Now, before we get into today's featured interview, make sure you follow and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. You can find us on all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. Also, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Click the bell to get notification when each new episode is uploaded. And lastly, if you or somebody else on your team has an awesome story to share, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new stories to share. All right, on to today's episode. For any agent breaking into a new market, it can be daunting. You not only need to learn the nuances of the community, but you also are going to be going head-to-head with agents already firmly entrenched. So how do you break in? Well, Ryan Smith, founder and creator of launchyourfarm.com, joins us today to talk all about geographic farming. Using his own experience of having to establish himself in a new market, Ryan has created a ton of great content and educational material to help you find, focus, and select the right geographic farm. And just for our listeners, Ryan is offering 20% off of his course when you use the promo code SMART20. So go on over to his website, launchyourfarm.com, and check it out. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're at, what your background is in the real estate game?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So I'm Ryan Smith. I am the creator of the Launch Your Farm program. We have a video show online. So I interview agents who do geographic farming and real estate. So I started that. I'll go back and give you my kind of Cole's Notes version of where I came from. So I've been in the business 13 years almost. And for me, I moved out of my area completely, knew nobody, started on a team, and I had a great leadership and a really great experience. We started off with internet leads, and I was thankful for that because I'm not a cold caller. I'm not a person who's out there door knocking and things like that. So I had a good experience getting started, but I knew nobody. And I moved to this small town. The population was like 20 something thousand people in there. And it was very old boys club of a town. And I learned very quickly that like at that place, you had to be someone, you had to build rapport with people. Internet leads itself wasn't just going to cut it. So I kind of got started with the internet leads, and then I moved. So my brokerage at the time had 2 offices. I moved to a bigger, the city. And then I started looking into farming at that point. So I looked into farming, and my boss was telling me like, yeah, you should really get into farming. It's a good way to grow your business. It's a really good way to get yourself going. And I did it, and I failed. I failed miserably. I started with a mortgage broker and a home stager, and I took the things that I heard when people talked about farming, and I took the numbers of, well, I got to have a good turnover rate, and I got to get a good price point, and that's what I went with, and I failed. What I didn't know was I didn't look at demographics. So from a language perspective, and for where we are in Canada, we have a very strong immigration culture around where we are. So there's a lot of people who didn't speak English as their first language. So culturally, it just wasn't the right fit. And then there was other people who were just crushing it, who matched culturally with who was living there. And then, so we did it for about 6 months, and I flopped. I didn't stick with it. And then I moved again. And that's when I really started going, okay, what did I do wrong? What have I done over the last few years? And then I started diving into farming. And I had a business partner at the time, and we decided, let's pick an area. I took all the things I learned about farming. I literally compressed it into this one area, and we just ran with it. And we did really well with it. And then that really kind of got me started into figuring out why farming works. Why is it good? Why aren't people doing it? And that was another big part of it. And how can we do it differently? And there was a gentleman that was farming the area that we had farmed prior, who crushed it. And he ended up passing away a few years prior to that. And everyone knew he owned that area. And what happened is he lost obviously market share because he wasn't alive, but people in that area were already knowing that it's good to have a market specialist, to have that person who's the go-to person. And we just really started hitting it. And then basically that kind of spurred me into, I started doing productivity coaching. I started my own show. I had it in the past. And then I was wanting to take all the stuff I've learned and create it into one kind of program. And that's kind of the how it all came together. So
that's where you're at now. That's what you're doing now. Awesome. Well, yeah. So tell me about, some of those struggles that you had, first, when you broke that first, place you were telling me about, the smaller town, how tough can it be for somebody that's moving to a smaller town to break in? Because like you said, it is a tight knit community and it's hard to break that shell.
Yeah, it was very difficult at first because I didn't know anyone. And had I know what I know now, I would have done things very differently. I definitely would have changed my approach. And I think there are definitely ways to get through past being that person who grew up there. But it was very tricky for me. And that's where I didn't see the long-term game with what I was doing. And it didn't really work. I was young. I was 25 when I got started. So I had check mark against me each step of the way. And it was difficult. But once I kind of figured out when I moved to the bigger city, that's when I really started piecing it together and figuring out what was working and what wasn't working.
Yeah. So, for those agents that are moving, what is like maybe your top 3 things, that they need to start doing like right away when they move in?
The big thing I always tell, no matter whether you're new, not new, whatever you're doing, you need to have a database, and having a database is critical. And I've heard that. I can go back 13 years ago and my boss said the same advice. He gave me a piece of paper and told me to write down all the names of people I knew, which was very little at the time. But having a database that is a legitimate database, not just names on a sheet of paper, not just an Excel sheet, not just people in a database. In my opinion, it's a living, breathing thing that evolves and grows. So starting with that right away is critical. When it comes to farming, there's different strategies I would say that I would focus on. But if I was new and I was getting started, I would be focusing on local businesses. And that's one of the things I'm really pushing, especially because of everything going on with COVID. And I've been saying that for the last 6 months, that right now there's a tremendous opportunity to make an impact in our community, and make an impact in your business, and make an impact in the local businesses community because of everything that's happened. And each area is going to be hit differently, more harder or less harder, but at some form or another in North America, people are hit hard because of COVID. And I think being able to help and support local businesses is, in my opinion, one of the best opportunities to just win, give back, and make a difference. So I think getting involved and making a difference that way is critical. I think social media is something that's always there and it's always going to be there, but a lot of agents use it wrong and they don't do it right. When it comes to geographic farming, there's some really cool things you can do with it that really help take you past that next level. So I'd say getting a grip on what you should be doing social media wise and not just spending your time on there. And then I think really it's just building relationships. At the end of the day, this business is about building relationships. So figuring out what works for you. And I'm a firm believer that you should do the business that matches your style. And I don't think that there's one way to do business. I think there's 100 ways to do business, and finding a fit that's going to work for you, but something that you can still commit to. Some agents use the excuse and they just keep jumping on to the next thing, going, it's not my fit. At some point you should commit. But I think really finding out what's going to be a good fit for you and building a business around that.
Right. So I think, going back, hitting on all those points a little bit, the database thing, that, absolutely, you have to know who your client base is. But I think a lot of people do it, like you said, they just put names on a piece of paper. What are your tips to actually creating that living document and making it actually work for you?
Big thing for me is adding value to them. And I think a lot of agents miss that, and they think that they feel that the database is their opportunity to promote themselves to the database. And in reality, I look at it as your database is an opportunity for you to give value to. And when you look at your database that way, it changes how you see your database and what you do with your database. When you see, how can I add value to these people's lives? What you send, how you send it, what you do with that database is going to be very different than a promotional based one. Mm-hmm. And a lot of agents get in this mindset of, my job as an agent is to promote myself to people. And it's like, that's a small portion of it. And if you do things right, the promotion should take care of itself. Right. So when you look at your database, you have to see they're people on the other side. They're human beings. They have lives. They have things that interest them. They have things that are important to them. And when you can add value to them, it makes it just easier. It makes it more bite-sized for you to actually take it on and go do it when you know, hey, I'm adding value to these people's lives. So I would say you got to figure out what you can do to add value, and that will then make that step a lot easier to get going with it.
Right. And I think that, that adding value thing also translates really well into what you were talking about with the, especially right now with COVID and our local communities, they're all hurting, and especially like our family run restaurants and things like that. So like, what kind of things are you seeing the successful agents doing to help, work with those local communities, whether it be, sending gift cards, from those places, partnering up with, all the shops.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the ways to do it, like you mentioned, is gift cards. So supporting them personally is, I'd say, before you do anything, support your local businesses personally. Go out and shop whenever you can. Shop local, shop at the mom and pop stores. The other thing is doing promotions for them. And I say this all the time with local businesses. Most businesses are not marketers. They run a business. They may be a hair salon. They may be a butcher. They're good at their craft or they're good at their trade, but they're not business people and they're not good at marketing. So even take away COVID, generally they suck at marketing. So there's an opportunity for you to help them market. And if you're into real estate and you're into marketing and you're good at it, you have an opportunity to help them with their marketing. So now that COVID's hit, generally speaking, their budget's even less than what it used to be. So creating opportunities to help them market. So whether that's cross promoting, whether that's running events, whether that's, like you said, buying some gift cards and doing some giveaways, whether that's acknowledging what they're doing. I think a big opportunity that a lot of agents are missing is doing interviews. So highlighting what those local businesses are doing. Most businesses would love to get that extra attention and exposure. And if you can become that ambassador in your community and be that go-to person, you can now create one channel or one resource where people come to find out what's happening in the community. It benefits you and then it benefits them. So if you can help build an audience, you can then share it. And the one thing I talk about all the time is the great thing with going after businesses is it's a one-to-many approach if you do it correctly. Rather than me trying to sell myself one person by one person, if you can get in front of those businesses, they're in return going to want to share what's happening. And I use this analogy all the time that if I put an ad in the paper, I don't go tell my friends and family, or if I put a Facebook ad, I don't go show my friends and family that I was put in the paper. Or I put an ad in, but if I get highlighted in something, or if I was featured in something, or I was interviewed by someone, I'm going to go share that. I'm going to go tell my friends and family about that because it makes me feel good. So when you interview those local businesses, they're going to do the same. It makes them feel good that they were featured on something, and they're going to share it on their social media and tell people about it. And it creates that generosity.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, how many times you walked into a business and they have the plaques on the wall that says, voted number one, it's all about it.
Exactly.
And I really think that type of content plays really well on social media.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's where a lot of people are missing the social media aspect of things.
Yep,
is
exactly.
Really ingrain yourself in your community with it.
Yep. And a lot of people think social media is a marketing tool. There's a marketing element of it, but it's called social media for a reason. It's social and it's supposed to be social. And if you do it correctly, you can, like I said, you can get the promotion out of it without being, I'm the best agent, I sell more homes, I do this, I do that. And a lot of people take it as me. And again, I use the example all the time about if I just posted that I had a sandwich today and I post a picture of my sandwich on social media, people go, you may have one person who's creepily likes you and likes that. But if I say, I had a sandwich today, what's your favorite sandwich? Or what did you eat for lunch? You're going to get more people engaging and interacting because they want to talk about themselves. Right. And that's where, when you do it with farming, when you use social media for your community, the content is so easy, and it became so easy to share that kind of stuff because it's what's your favorite restaurant? Who's a good person I should talk to? What's happened in the community? Did you know in 2 years ago this happened? Or can you guess where this picture was from 100 years ago? So it makes it easier to create content that people like and care about, and not just promote myself.
Right. And by doing that, you're also avoiding that whole idea of, if all I'm doing is putting up, this is my listing, your engagement and the people, they're going to start hitting that unfollow button pretty quick, and when you do have a new listing, it's going to come across, they're just scrolling through their phone. And because you've engaged and had really good content throughout, all the past, they're going to stop and check out that listing.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that I preach, it's a system I created myself. I call it the scope method. And I think it's ties in well to this. So basically a lot of agents typically do one of these 5 things, but I think you need to have all of these 5 to make sure you have a well-balanced approach when it comes to your marketing and to your just general business. So it's scope. It stands for self-promotion. It's the S. C is community. O is online. P is prospecting, and E is education. So when you have that and you look at it and you go, okay, how can I have a well-balanced approach to what I'm doing? If you look at the scope, you say, okay, does this check those boxes? Sometimes you can have things that work on all of those levels or a couple of them. And that's what I call strategy stacking, where you can then stack your strategies together, where you're covering some of those things in one or two different things that you're doing. So when you look at it, you go, okay, am I doing enough education? Am I doing enough self-promotion? Is there enough prospecting? Is there enough online stuff? And when you look at it in your marketing, you can say, okay, I'm really short on education and I'm really short on some community stuff. And I've interviewed hundreds of agents, and one of the biggest things I've seen who have the most success are the ones who put a community part into it, and they make that the staple of what they do. The rest can then take care of itself. Then you can promote yourself. You can do online, you can do education around that. But when you make the community the hub of it, it makes it so much easier to really crush it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, since you said you took all this wealth of knowledge that you had,
yep,
and you wanted to create, these courses. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. So I've got a few different things that I've got on the go, and always evolving and adapting and adding things. So obviously the show is my kind of hub. And that's, again, I interview agents who've done geographic farming. So I'm at episode, I think it'll be 25 right now. And that's free online. People can check it out. And it's similar to this, where it's interviewing and letting, or finding out what other agents are doing, what strategies have worked, kind of where they've been, what they're doing in the future. And that's really that's my education component. That's my way to help provide value. So I've got another course. It's an entry-level course. It's the farm course. It's not very expensive. And it's just a kind of intro to what farming is, why you should be doing it, and kind of the fundamentals of it. And then I've got two unique programs that I think are really interesting, and I think a lot of agents have seen a lot of value in them. So I've got a 30-day launch program. So basically it is a program where it's literally a video a day for 30 days. And it's, if you want to get started in farming, you go through this, and it literally, you start, the first week is going through all the education, going through figuring out what areas to farm. And then by the end of the first week, you've selected your farm. And then you go through the marketing and the message, and then you go through the value adds, and then you go through pulling it all together. So by the end of the 30 days, it's forced you to kind of take small steps rather than just saying, here, go farm and figure it out. It kind of breaks it down. And I know for myself, that's something that I needed. And so I always try to create stuff that, if it was me on the other side, what would I want? And I like that. Take a step. Here's the education, and then now go do the step, rather than just theoretical. And so that's a good one if agents are just trying to get started. And then I have my boot camp, which is a 8-week program. So it's 1 hour a week we go through as a group, and then it's for people who are farming. Mm-hmm. It's actually more in depth, and we go through about 15 different strategies over the course of the 8 weeks. And then it's learning about them. We give you the scripts, we give you the information you need, the tools and resources. And at the end of the 8 weeks, they can then go through and choose and say, hey, which of these strategies do I want to put into my farm and execute? So that's what I've got right now. And then I'm about to launch in the next month or two a group membership site. So it'll be a little more affordable. It's just an ongoing monthly information, things like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. I think everything, anytime, there is so much knowledge out there, and just kind of finding a place to kind of create a hub for it is great.
And that's why I started it, because I tend to be obsessive when it comes to learning about stuff. And then I dive in and go, what can I figure out? How do I learn? And I was going through and going, there isn't a lot of resources out there for geographic farming. And I know, because I've seen it personally, there's a resurgence of interest in geographic farming, and people are trying to reevaluate their business. And I was like, there's not a lot of resources and tools in one place. There's an article here, a video here, there's a 10-minute clip over here. And there wasn't anyone really pulling it all together in one spot. And I wanted to be the go-to resource for geographic farming. So.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell me, as you talk about, like, as you just said, there's kind of a resurgence of it, I guess. Yeah. I've seen ads all over the place for geographic farming, but for those agents that have been around, for the 10, 12 years that maybe just haven't done it, but are, they're not moving markets. How do you start farming a market that you've lived in, but haven't been farming?
That's it. So it's a kind of loaded question in that it really depends on the agent themselves and what they want to go after. I'll start with the mistakes that agents make before, and then I'll kind of go into it. So the mistake a lot of agents make is they think about geographic farming of what it used to be, and what it was always taught and was always preached. And again, I get this all the time where people think, I don't want to do farming because I don't want to do postcards. So the first thing is, a lot of people think farming is sending out postcards or flyers. And that's an element of farming, but it's not the be all and end all. That's the way it was done 15 or 20 years ago. So a lot of people think, well, farming is just postcards and door knocking. And that's, again, part of why I've created this to help bust that myth. It's becoming the local expert. And there's so many different ways you can do that. So to that point, there are, again, a ton of different ways. The mistake that a lot of agents make is they say, well, I'm going to start with my neighborhood because I live here. And it's not that it's a bad thing, but it doesn't mean it's the best neighborhood. So a lot of agents will choose the area they live in to focus on. Well, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration when you're choosing a farm. And that's part of some of the programs that I have, and to help you figure out what is it that's important. Choosing a neighborhood just because you live there could work, but it may not work. So when you're getting started, it really becomes down to what resources you have, how much money do you want to spend, and then what approach do you want to do. So one of the things I talk about is your budget. So there's 3 parts to a budget. A lot of people think it's financial. That's one part. So there's the financial budget, there's the time budget, and then there's the energy budget. So the financial makes sense for people like, okay, how much money do I have? Do I want to spend? And the time makes sense. But the energy budget is the thing that a lot of people skip over, which is this going to suck the energy out of me? Is this going to suck the life out of me? If I had to door knock all the time, or if I'm basing it on cold calling, I only have so much energy that I can expend to actually want to do this. And if you're doing stuff that you hate or you just don't want to do, you're going to zap that energy budget. So finding something that you like, that works together, that works with your time and your money is, I think, one of the first steps to really figuring out what the foundation is. Once you know, okay, I've got X amount of time, if I got X amount of money, then I can start doing it. As a seasoned agent, they tend to have more money and less time. As a new agent, they have more time and less money. So you kind of figure out what strategy you have and then shift over time and then basically buy your time back.
Right. Now, I really like that idea of the energy budget, because I think that is one of those, I think all of us do it, in all kind of different things. We start planning out these, our next projects and things like that, but we really don't take into account, how much of a drain it's going to be, and that is such a big part. It's like we're in January now, so these New Year's resolutions, I'm going to go work out, every day. And, by day 7, you're like, this sucks, and how many people drop off of it because you haven't thought of the energy budget.
That's a perfect example. That's exactly. And again, as I mentioned, when I started, we did a lot of internet leads. So that helped me stick around with it because I'm technical and analytical and I like that. But I was going to join another team and it was all cold calling. And I'm like, I would have quit the business. I wouldn't be here in 13 years because that would have just zapped my energy. And that's not who I am. Not that I can't do it, but it's like, that just wouldn't make me happy. So,
that's awesome. What, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but, so for your course, people can find you at website again?
So there's different sites for different courses, but the launchyourfarm.com is the main site. Within that, you can find the course, but it's the farm boot camp is for the boot camp, the farm course, and the farm launch. Those are the 3 sites. I can shoot you that information as well. If you want to put it in the notes, you can send it out. But if you go to launchyourfarm.com, you can find the information, you can find the show on there, you can find access to the course and everything as well. So that's the best way to connect.
Yeah. So, and just kind of wrapping up a little bit, just tell me, why was it geographic farming that you really kind of think on?
It's a great question. So for me personally, why I like it, again, I mentioned strategy stacking. What it is for me and why I think it's important is geographic farming allows you to layer in different strategies and have that compound effect. And I would say, if you go back to the way a lot of agents have been taught, they teach one pillar of doing business. So it's become a door knocking person, or become a cold calling person, or become a FSBO person. And on their own, those are great pillars, but they don't tend to work well together, or they don't put them together. With farming, I can literally layer in. I can do geographic farming where I do cold calling. I can do open houses. I can do for sale by owners. I can do business to business. I can do online. I can do social media, and it has a compound effect. And I use the example all the time of, I'd rather have 5 signs in one neighborhood than 1 sign in 5 neighborhoods. So it makes it easier. It makes it just easier to do your business. It makes it easier to get the business. answer way more of the objections up front because they see you more often and they see you as the expert. And then it just makes it more enjoyable. When we started our farm, once we started rolling with it, it was like, man, this is easy. And it's like, we knew how to price homes. We knew what models they were. We knew who the builders were. We knew what the floor plans were. And we walked in, there was a confidence that I wouldn't have had if I took a listing in the next town over or in a neighborhood, 3 neighborhoods over, because I didn't know it. And so it gives you a lot more confidence. It gives you the ability to really become that expert. And it doesn't take a lot of work. That's the thing. A lot of people think I have to sell a lot of homes to become an expert. That's not true either. Like, there's a lot of different things you can do to position yourself as the expert without having to have even sold a home. And that's with our farm. Never even sold a home before in the neighborhood when we started. And because of the way we position ourselves and the way we market ourselves, our first listing, she walked in and said, "You guys are the experts, so you tell me." I was like, never even sold a home before, but we did our marketing right and we positioned ourselves and we learned more than anyone else and we just mastered it. And so I think if agents are willing to do that, it can also make it more fun. And I think that's for the big part of it for me is I like to learn. I like to add in new things and I like to try things. So when you have a farm, it's kind of like your lab and it's a testing grounds where you can try different things. If you just try one thing and you suck at it and you go, "Oh, that didn't work," and then you can kind of get defeated, where this gives you an opportunity to keep reinventing yourself, if you will, and just keep adding in value.
Right. And I think, a lot of times people get hung up on what niche they're in, whether it's, FSBOs or, expires or, here we go after expireds a lot, but, with this, you're focusing on the community. It doesn't matter what the price range necessarily is. So I really think that, when it comes to that energy, having that energy reserve because it's different all the time, I think could definitely help almost increase that energy level a little bit.
Exactly. And you're also able to then pick an area that matches with what you want to do and how you want to do it. And I got to use my example. My friend, Rob, when he got started, I helped coach him. And he went for an area that was a more older demographic. People had been there for 40 years. It still had the green shag carpet. But what happened was there's a lot of people who were tearing down those houses and putting up these big mansions. So he does well in the luxury area. So he jumped into this area knowing that it's a long-term game. So it's been 5 years for him now. And there's now these multi-million-dollar homes being built over top of these tiny little homes. And for him, that was exciting. He likes the new constructions. He likes the new design and he enjoyed that. Then you have someone who will like family. So they go after areas that are more family friendly, or you may have someone who's downtown and likes condos or luxury condos or waterfront. And you can really tailor it to kind of who you want and what you want to go after and make it the business you want.
Awesome. Well, cool. Is there any, kind of parting information or just like those little things to get people started?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice when it comes to farming is to start smaller than you think. The mistake that most agents make, and the reason I see most agents fail when it comes to farming, is they go too big and they try to reach more people and they ended up burning their budget. They burn out. They don't have the time. They don't have the resources to do it. So I would say I'd rather see you start small and then scale up than start big and then have to scale back, because that's worse, scaling back. So pick an area that probably smaller than you were going to think. Start with that. Figure out, again, use that as your lab. I'd rather see you do 500 homes for a few months, figuring it out, getting the kinks worked out of it, and then going to 1,000 homes versus doing 1,000 homes and then realizing, oh crap, I screwed up. It didn't work. So start small and then scale up. And I think if you do that right, if you keep it in budget and you keep at it, you'll have more success in the long run than just going out and just throwing all your money around.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
I really appreciate it. It's been great. Thank you.
I really want to thank Ryan for joining us, and I really appreciate him for sharing his tips for successful geographic farming. Again, for our listeners, Ryan is offering 20% off his course when you use promo code SMART20 at launchyourfarm.com. So once again, if you think you or somebody else on your team has an awesome story or tip to share with our community, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure you subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and I'll see you on the next episode.